If you happen to see Allison, Jennifer, and I driving around the streets of Indianapolis, and if you happen to follow us for any length of time, chances are pretty good that you're going to witness some exuberant car karaoke, complete with air guitars and steering wheel drum solos. And if you find us at a stoplight, you may even witness some, I'm not really sure exactly how to say this, some very, let's just say, animated car seat dance moves. We really aren't bashful about it at all. As a family, we share a love for pop music, for 80s dance hits, hair metal bands, grunge, and classic rock. We really love classic rock. We find joy singing at the top of our lungs with the Beatles, the Eagles, America, Joan Jett, Queen, Steely Dan, Heart, and yes, John, even a bit of Rush. You could say that classic rock is our family's soundtrack or songbook, if there is such a thing. Well, as I said earlier, tucked almost in the middle of your Bible is a different kind of songbook. We know it as the Psalms. It contains 150 songs, hymns, and poems divided into 5 different sections. The longest chapter in the entire Bible is Psalm 119, and the shortest chapter is Psalm 117. They were written by a variety of authors from many different locations across several different time periods, and many of the Psalms were assigned to the pen of King David. The Psalms were the songs Jesus would have learned from his youth. They were likely taught to him by his family and sung in his synagogue and when the family took their journey to the temple in Jerusalem. These beautiful pieces of art are shared by Christians, Jews, and Muslims. You can hear them recited and sung in mosques, synagogues, temples, and churches all around the world and in nearly every language and dialect. In fact, you just heard a beautiful setting of our psalm this morning, sung by our basses. Thank you. As I would venture to guess that if you were to take a survey of people who are familiar with the Psalms and ask them which of the Psalms is their favorite, you would likely receive as many different responses as the number of people asked. It is likely that many would point to Psalm 23, Psalm 46, or Psalm 139 as their favorite choice. They may even be able to recite portions of their favorite psalm from memory, and you likely can do the same. There are psalms of celebration, psalms of lament, psalms of ascent, coronation psalms, penitential psalms, and psalms of thanksgiving. There truly seem to be a psalm for every occasion. And as a result, these beautiful texts are often read at weddings and at funerals. They are cross-stitched on pillows and painted for wall hangings in homes. They are recited on high holy days and sung as prayers of the people. The Psalms are ubiquitous. They can be found nearly everywhere. Now, there's a reason why the Psalms still have resonance and have been a part of the faith practices of people for literally thousands of years. They represent a memorable way to teach history and to express that which the community deems to be most important. The Psalms tell us about God. They reflect the struggle of a life of faith. And they help us understand what it means to be, well, human. Often, when reading the Psalms, it's as if one is looking at the world through the pen of the psalmist and yet seeing the self gazing back. In the beautiful and often painful words of the psalmist, you can hear the echo of your own questions. You can feel the twinge of your own pain. You can sense the depth of your own need for comfort, and you can find yourself even sustained by someone else's faith, and often that is enough to simply make it through yet another day. Yes, the Psalms seem right for nearly every occasion, for every time, and for every place. And perhaps the Psalms are perfect for us right here, now, in our own time. For friends, our days seem full of reasons to question, to doubt, to be filled with sorrow and lament. A quick reading of the newspaper or a glance at the daily news confirms this to be true. Another war, another act of violence, another senseless death. Another day of unexpected financial news, another diagnosis, another storm. Another community suffering another loss, another act of injustice, another breakdown of systems designed to support the most vulnerable among us. Indeed, it is so easy in these days to be filled with despair. And as a result, we may find ourselves saying under our breath or even shouting at the top of our lungs, "My God, where are you?" Well, in our text this morning, Psalm 91, we read the words of another who perhaps struggled or was struggling with this very question. This, I would say, statement of faith at the time of its writing. Psalm 91 begins with a call, maybe even a call to worship of sorts. It beckons the congregation and hearer alike to join in the remembrance of the sovereign God of their ancestors and of their history, and how this God is a shelter in the midst of life's storms and a shadow to protect all who dwell in it from the blistering heat of the noonday sun. This is evident in the body of the psalm as well. The author knows how difficult it can be to remember the faithful promises of the divine within the struggle. So, there at the beginning, the author invites the reader, the hearer, maybe even themselves, to remember and proclaim, or perhaps plead with courage, "My refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust." This may be their version of our question. My God, where are you? Following the introduction, a theme statement or call to worship, the language of our psalm changes. The psalmist now writes to unpack the reason for the opening statement of faith. In essence, the author lays out their why. From the beginning, it is important to note that the psalmist's faith is rooted in the faithfulness of God about whom they write, not in the strength or veracity of their own believing. There is no wishful thinking here, or unrealistic expectation that somehow a belief in God will remove trouble or trial from the journey of life, or that by simply faithing hard enough, God will reward you with an easy and carefree, challenge-free life. No, the psalmist's words are drenched in reality, and they declare that their faith is found in God's promised and experienced presence in the midst of struggles that will inevitably come their way. So listen again to the psalmist's words, but this time through that particular lens. The author writes, "For God will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and deadly pestilence. God will cover you with God's pinions, and under God's wings you will find refuge. God's faithfulness is a shield and a buckler. You will not fear the terror of the night, or the arrows that fly by day, or the pestilence that stalks in darkness, or the destruction that wastes at noonday. You see, the psalmist is keenly aware that there are unseen snares and pitfalls that present dangers in life. The psalmist is familiar with disease and disaster that threaten well-being. The psalmist understands that there are terrors in the night and arrows that fly by day that challenge their own existence in the world. And the psalmist knows that the congregation shares in this life experience. So do we. But there in the midst, even within the doubts and thoughts of uncertainty and insecurity that go along with difficult obstacles faced, the author takes comfort and finds rest in the knowledge that God will be present. And they invite the congregation to do the same. The author knows that like the mother bird who covers her young under her wings, providing comfort and security in the midst of the winds and storm, God provides shelter, an ever-present haven when the tempest inevitably blows and the deluge overwhelms. About this psalm, author and professor of the Hebrew Bible, Walter Brueggemann, of which some of you are very familiar, he writes, "This transcendent God initiated an intimate relationship and cares with the love of a mother bird. Such divine care is not limited by time or space." Friends, this isn't a new truth or a particularly radical idea. We learned about it in our youth, in our songs, in our prayers, in our hymns, in our statements of faith. But we, like the psalmist, also know that life happens. And it can be so pressure-filled and demoralizing that it can even leave us questioning our own abilities to believe anymore. We may even find ourselves thinking that somehow, within the pain of our daily struggles, we have been abandoned, left alone by the divine to fend for ourselves. That our life, our faith, our being is unworthy of the presence of the divine. And if all of that isn't enough, there are then those who attempt to sell a distorted version of faith and twist scriptures to fit it. They equate effort and material blessing with authenticity and divine acceptance. But that's a fashioning of God in the image of consumerism, where work and pietistic performance is rewarded. It leaves faith destructed in its wake, and broken spirits are left behind. And it has nothing to do with the divine that we encounter in the Psalms or in the Gospels. For in those texts, we meet a God who promises presence in the midst of all things, for all people, no matter the struggle. The faith of the psalmist, the one proclaimed through the incarnation of Jesus and the words of the authors of the Gospels, is a faith that has dirt under its fingernails, twigs in its messy hair, calluses on its heels, and threadbare patches on the knees of its blue jeans. It isn't polished and shiny. It's gritty and real. It's a faith that has staying power, even when we waver and stumble. For this faith is not in ourselves and in our abilities to believe. No, this faith is in the one who is trustworthy, steadfast, and true, even in our unbelief. It is a faith that trusts that God's promise of presence is dependable, that the sovereign God is not detached from our pain, but is present in it, and promises to accompany us through it. This is where hope resides. we are not alone in the muck and the mire, or when we are found at the bottom of the deepest well of despair. Perhaps the true test of faith isn't in knowing all of the answers and having easy solutions. Maybe, just maybe, faith is found in the courage to ask even the unanswerable questions and to trust that the divine is there in the midst of the asking, as well as in the moments that seem void of an answer. It's much more real, tangible, honest, raw faith experience to acknowledge the presence of the one who is present, even in the midst of our world, of our days, of our struggles. The one who accompanies us is also the one who promises strength in our weaknesses, comfort within sorrow, and companionship in our loneliness. This changes everything. And I believe it has the power to change us and to impact the way in which we live, the way we see and engage the world around us. For if the promise is presence, there is nothing we face that can take that away from us. Not one thing. And then, if we believe that to be true, we are invited to enact that very story for other people. We are invited to embody that truth and allow it to become incarnate in us and then through us. The promise of presence gives us the freedom and strength to be present for those around us who find themselves at the end of their own abilities to hold it all together. Those who are facing yet another difficult moment in life. Those who just aren't sure anymore. And because of it, we discover the courage to stand up and to strive to change the things we can change, to ease the pain and struggle for others. And when we do that together, something amazing happens. This space in which we gather gives testimony to the truth that we believe, that no matter what we may be going through, God is present. This is sanctuary, a refuge, a stronghold in times of trouble. All of our life can be brought here, will be held here. This becomes a place to be fully you and to be embraced while you journey in the midst of pain and suffering, as well as joy and celebration. For the God of presence is in this place. Friends, when we find ourselves crying out, my God, where are you? May we discover the answer in the midst of the question itself. For God is there, in it. And that makes all the difference in the world for the sake of the world. To God be the glory. Amen.